Hello, everybody. This is Todd Dewey from the hit show Ice Road Truckers on the History Channel. And my source of radio and all truckers news, I go to tncradio.live.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the train station on tncradio.live. I am Bill Waldrop, along with Jim Leaders, my co-host. We're in Houston, Texas. And our show last week was so popular and so entertaining with our guest, Steve Lee. We have asked him back again this week, and we appreciate you being here, sir. I wanted to pick up on where we left off on last week's show, talking about operating the steam crew and what you're doing now and all of that. Now, you said that John Ramash at Wasatch contacted you. Tell us about that company, where they are, what they do, and a little more detail how you got involved with them.
Well, at one time, during the last few years of our career, I hired Wasatch to do some work down at the shop for us, including we made some major changes to the water cars, the two water cars that we carried around with us with the 3900.
Yeah.
They needed some structural repairs. They needed some changes to the outside of them. And they needed a bunch of stuff removed from both inside and outside to get the tear weight down a little bit.
Okay.
So we had them remove the steam coils and the electrical coils from the inside of it. And we had them remove the jacket and the lagging and all of that kind of stuff from the outside. And then sandblast them and paint them and do some body work on them to bring them back up to what they looked like when they were real tenders,
Right.
following steam engines. And we did that, and that increased the water capacity to almost 30,000 gallons per tender.
Wow.
From 28,000 before, just by filling up the space that had been taken up by the steam tubes and stuff that it didn't need anymore because it wasn't carrying fuel.
Right.
And that made them look better. And we painted them correctly, as close as we could to what a passenger car would look like. We got the big Union Pacific stuff off the side of them and put it up at the top, and various other things. We did work on the trucks. We did work on the brake systems and things of that nature. And then they did a really nice job for us. I had them do a few other things around the shop with some of the support equipment. So I was familiar with them. Of course, I've known John since he was about 9 years old.
Wow.
And at that time, he was anxious to be a steam engineer, and he's another one who actually became one.
Oh, okay.
He has quite a career background. He started Wasatch sometime in the 90s here in Cheyenne, and they quickly became known for doing work around the country. They got their ASMER stamp and various things like that. They can actually build new boilers, and they have built new boilers. They can overhaul just about anything from a passenger car to a headlight. And they started getting work from around the country. When I came to work here, the biggest project they had was the restoration of a Jim Crow car. Now I'll explain what a Jim Crow car is. It's from back in the Jim Crow era, and it was when the old separate but equal thing was the law in the southeastern part of the country.
Right.
In other words, blacks and whites could ride on the same train, but they couldn't ride in the same car. They couldn't be integrated or any of that sort of thing. So they would take a certain number of passenger cars, and they would divide them down the middle. And the baggage section was in the middle, and one end of the car was for white folks, and the other end of the car was for black folks. And each end of the car had its own toilets. Each end of the car had its own water fountains, and separate but equal.
Right.
Now, at this time, they being the Smithsonian Institution, were busy designing what is now called the Museum of African American History and Heritage.
Okay.
which is built on the mall there in Washington, D.C. This was going to be and is a multi-story building. It has 2 floors underground.
Wow.
And the rest of it is above ground. And guess where they wanted this restored passenger car to go?
Not on the roof.
Not on the roof, not hardly. No, they wanted it to go in the basement, one of the rooms in the basement, what I call the basement. It's really an exhibit room.
Yeah.
And this is a huge museum. This thing takes up almost an entire city block.
Wow.
And it is. And it's very much worth a visit. Let me say that too. We did the restoration work on this car, which it had been sitting in the weeds for years and years and years at a museum. And we took the car into a shop that we leased in Kentucky, and we tore it down completely and brought it back as close as we could to the way it was when it was a Jim Crow car. We replaced the floor, we replaced the wiring, we replaced all the windows, window shades. We had the seats reupholstered. We replaced just about everything. There was a lot of rust damage to the car on the outside. The inside had a lot of water damage. Anything that was supposed to move wouldn't, and anything that was not supposed to move would. We did a whole lot of stuff to that car. We basically rebuilt it without tearing it down, if you know what I mean.
What was the car original, and what railroad was it from?
It was a Southern Railway car. It started out as a day coach.
Okay.
And it and a bunch of other cars were converted into these. It depended on what railroad you were talking about. They each had a sneaky name for them.
Right.
Some of them called them segregated cars. Some of them called them compartmented cars. Southern cut right to the chase and called them Jim Crow cars.
Right.
It was converted in the early 1940s.
Wow.
And we had to restore it as close as we could to that early 1940s thing. One of the things we had to do was put a new floor in it. And this car had been built, or had been, when it was converted, they took the carpets out of the car and replaced them with floor tiles.
Okay.
Which the ones we took out of there, of course, were loaded with asbestos. So we had
lovely.
Yes, sir. And we had to have new ones made that did not have the A word.
Right.
And they had to be the same pattern. They had to be the same size and all that sort of stuff. So it was quite a bit of work. And then, of course, we had to paint and letter the outside of it. And the Southern cars were painted with the underbody and trucks were black, as was the roof.
Right.
And the rest of the car was green with gold lettering, numbers, and stripes.
Right.
We did all of that and had it inspected by the Smithsonian numerous times during the project. We put new vestibules on the car. We put all new window shades in the car, a whole bunch of stuff.
Now, did the Smithsonian pay for all this?
The Smithsonian paid for it, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And we then they decided they wanted it cocooned for the trip to Washington. So we had an outfit. We were near Lake Cumberland, and we had an outfit there in Kentucky that came over and shrink wrapped it.
Wow.
And then we loaded it on a pretty large truck and took it on the interstate to Washington.
So it did not travel by railroad to Washington?
It did not travel by rail, mostly because of the age and because of what we would have to do to it to make it we would have had to change the trucks or the axles. We'd have to change a bunch of stuff on it. Yeah. And we didn't want to do that because that would ruin what they were trying to
in its original design, it wasn't capable of running on the railroad. So, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So we took it to Washington, and of all places, until they were ready to put it in the museum, we had to store it at the Air and Space Museum out at Dulles Airport.
Yeah.
So, here you've got this passenger car sitting right outside the building with one of the space shuttles in it. Kind of a
Wow.
kind of an odd deal there.
It was still shrink wrap, though, right? So
it was still shrink wrapped. If you didn't know what it was or couldn't figure out what the shrink wrap was covering, you had no idea what it was. It's just this big long gray thing.
Right.
Wow.
So, or white, should say. So anyway, the day came to take this and put it into the basement of the museum, which had been poured concrete, all that sort of thing. And that required, I don't know how many permits and all sorts of inspections. And oh my God, what'll happen if they cave in a sewer? That type of thing. We couldn't put the cranes to take it off the truck. We couldn't take them off the city streets, but we had to put them on timbers so they wouldn't fall into anything. And they had to reach out so far that we had to have very high capacity cranes, because the farther you reach out with a crane, the less it can handle as far as weight is concerned.
Right.
So we had a 500-ton crane and a 300-ton crane.
Wow.
One on each end of it. And we picked it up off the car and off the truck. And while they're doing this, they've got transits and surveyors checking to make sure that the ground doesn't recede and make sure that none of the cranes are going to turn over, and all this kind of stuff. And we lifted it up and rolled it over to the hole in the floor, or what would be the floor, and lowered it down into the basement, where we found out they hadn't put track down there yet.
Oh, no. That was my next question.
Yeah. Well, we had to set it on timbers down there and set the trucks down there too, until they managed to put a piece of track in for this thing to go on. And once they did that, it was a matter of jacking up the trucks and moving them onto the rail, and then jacking the car over onto the trucks.
Wow.
But in the meantime, we did not sink into the street. We didn't have any kind of problems like that. And I've been up to see it once since it was in there, because there were certain interior pieces in the bathrooms that we had to have recreated.
Right.
And we did that, and that wasn't done until it was in there. And of course, they didn't want it, rattling around in the car anyway. So I took that stuff up there and got a tour of the museum. And it's an enormous museum, and it's well worth the visit.
Awesome. Well, guys, let's take a break real quick here and grab a cup of coffee. This is the Train Station. Thank you for joining us here on tncradio.live. I'm Bill Waldrop, along with Jim Leaders. Our guest today is Steve Lee from Cheyenne, Wyoming, telling about his current job with the Wasatch Rail Group and all the different projects he works on. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey, rideshare drivers and gig economy workers, the host of tncradio.live, the Rideshare Rodeo Podcast, and the Gig Economy Podcast come together for news, talk, music, stories, laughs, and more. We're live Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, right here on tncradio.live.
Welcome back to the Train Station. This is tncradio.live with Jim Leaders. I'm Bill Waldrop, and our guest today is Steve Lee. He was so great to be with us on last week's show. We've asked him back to continue more of his fascinating stories. Steve, on the last segment, we were talking about moving that Jim Crow passenger car into the Smithsonian Institution by crane and lifting it into this building, and then they built the building around it. Did they put down like snap track already assembled, or how did they put in this track down there?
That would be too easy.
Yeah.
They lowered a bunch of ties down in there, and tie plates and spikes and all of that kind of stuff. And then they lowered 4 pieces of rail down there, and they put the track together in where it was supposed to be sitting.
Yeah.
And then put the car on the track.
Did they get railroad men to put that track together that knew how to do it?
Oh, no, of course not. I mean, that's a different union.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
But they did it.
They did it. They got it done.
That's
and it's really nice. You can You can go in one end of the car and go through the car and out the other end. One of the things we had to do to it, to modify it, the car is wheelchair accessible.
Aha, yes.
So
Originally, it would not have been.
Originally, it was not. So you come right off the platform into the vestibule without, going over any speed bumps or anything.
Right.
And a wheelchair will fit through the doors and down the aisles and around the restrooms and the baggage section and out the other end. And everything is lit like it was supposed to be inside. We restored all the light fixtures, the baggage racks, everything, I guess they called them the hat rails or hat racks up above the seats, and even the numbers that went on them.
Now, was the car electric even in its original build?
Yeah, it did have electric. It had the old 32 volt system that ran off of a generator that ran off one of the axles.
Right.
And we did have to convert that. When you opened the electrical cabinet on that car, you would have thought you walked into Dr. Frankenstein's library.
I bet.
I've never seen so many switches and lights and wires running every which direction.
Right.
You're afraid to touch anything.
Right.
We got all of that out of there, replaced it with a transformer system that would convert everything into the lighting we needed without all these exposed switches and things of that nature. So it works like it would have. It's still 32 volt light bulbs and all that sort of thing.
Oh, it is. I thought you would have converted it all to 110.
No, well, we did, but then we had to run it through a transformer, and two transformers. You had to run it into DC,
right,
and the lower voltage.
Oh, okay. So I thought you might have changed. They could look the same but run on different power. But I mean, they wanted it authentic, so it is 32 volts in the car.
It is.
Wow.
How many months did this project take from start to finish?
It took pretty close to a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It only took 3 days to get it up there, but it did that. Yeah. It took that time, and it didn't, 1 day to get it in the basement. But
and then you said they had not built the museum yet. They had to build the building around the car at that point.
Right, and that was another thing. We had to coordinate so that they had enough of the foundation and everything built. Oh, and by the way, this museum is sitting on top of an underground creek.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, which I guess apparently has always been there, and they've always built stuff on top of it, but everybody forgot it when they did this.
Right.
And so they had a little bit of earthwork to do.
I bet.
And drainage work and stuff like that. But we had to coordinate so that when the building was ready to accept the car, we were there with the car, and we couldn't go beyond that because everything else in the construction project depended on having this car in there
right
before they went on up with the walls. Wow. So when we did this, it was strictly the foundation of the building. And like I say, this is an enormous building.
Right.
So there's concrete and rebar everywhere. There were cranes everywhere, all of this kind of stuff. And everybody's looking at you like, when are you going to get this done so we can go back to work? That type of thing.
Man,
we got her done pretty quick and got out of there. We had to go back later. Another part of this, I forgot. They wanted a southern prison, guard tower down there.
Really?
So I can tell you, I have done time in the Angola prison in Louisiana.
Oh.
So the Wasatch did that?
Yep, we did.
So it's not just railroading. Whatever you need restored, they can do it, apparently.
Yeah, these guard towers were made out of concrete.
Yeah.
And we went in the prison and we cut this thing out of the ground and cut it into two pieces because it was too big to go on a truck.
Yeah.
By itself, and hauled it up to our shop and put it back together, or mocked it back together so we could do whatever it had to have to be returned to its era as a guard tower. They don't use that anymore. They use televisions and stuff like that.
Right.
So we did all of that, and we hauled that up there too. This convoy we had going up there consisted of a pilot car, and then this big truck, this big Kenworth from Wisconsin, with a trailer and a Jeep and a whole bunch of other stuff. The car was on that one. We had another truck with one of the cars, or car trucks, another one with the other car truck. We had yet another one with all the air conditioning and crap like that went underneath the car. And then we had two more trucks with the concrete tower that we had to put down in there too. And then assemble it after it got down in there.
Wow.
And it had lights in it. It has a platform around it, for the guards to walk around and look at whatever they look at. And we spent about a week in the prison there in Louisiana getting this out of there. This is an active prison, and this is where they keep the worst of the worst. I think the death row has like 48 people on it or something.
Wow.
These are people that are serving long sentences.
And you had to remove a tower, and I guess they put in another one.
No, these were retired. They had just been sitting around there for years.
Oh, okay.
And apparently the Smithsonian sent out a group of people to find the type of tower that they wanted. And this is where they found it. And they made a deal with the Louisiana prison system to get this thing out of there. And this was another procedure because, you had to get searched before you went in there and searched when you came out every day.
Right.
And we had to have trucks and cranes and stuff to load all of this. Those guys all had to be searched. Their trucks had to be searched.
How's the food?
It was interesting, to say the least. And we got to meet some of the prisoners. The only thing we couldn't do, or weren't supposed to do anyway, was take pictures of the prisoners. But we did get to talk to them. The guy running one of their cranes, the older guy, and he says, "Yeah, I'm in here for life." He said, "But I fooled them. They only convicted me of killing 7, and I actually killed 14."
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, he showed them.
Oh man. Unbelievable. Hey, let's take a quick break here real quick. More stories to come. This is TNCRadio.live, and you are inside the train station. I'm Bill Waldrop along with Jim Leaders, and our guest today is Steve Lee. We'll be right back.
Hey drivers, did you hear music on TNCRadio.live that you really liked? Or maybe you heard us interview an author of a book you'd like to read or listen to. You can get the books, music, and other products you hear about by going to our website at www.tncradio.live and clicking on the shopping cart.
Welcome back to the train station. This is TNCRadio.live. Thanks so much for tuning in. I am Bill Waldrop along with my co-host Jim Leaders, and our guest, continuing from last week, is Steve Lee. He is in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Steve, I wanted to talk a little about your experience involving George H.W. Bush, the museum in Texas, and the diesel engine that is either there or will be very soon.
It's there in College Station.
Okay. Yeah. So was that a Wasatch thing, or how did you get involved in that? And tell us a little about that experience.
No, my involvement with that was when I was still with the UP.
Okay.
And we did in fact, I was there for the movement of the locomotive when we took it up there the first time, and we put it inside the building.
Yeah.
And
we were there that day. That was the surprise with Dick Davidson.
Yeah. You remember they had the Bush family was there.
Right. Yep.
A number of invited guests, and they had the you ain't gonna believe this, but they had the Texas A&M choir there too.
Yeah.
The choir. And during one of the quiet times, they started singing the Atchison, Topeka, and the Santa.
I don't remember that. Was that during the public ceremony or before?
No, it was during one of the quiet. It was between speeches or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was sitting next to the guy that ran the Operation Control Center, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and we both said, "Oh shit."
Oh my gosh.
Now,
apparently nobody else caught on to it, or they were a lot quieter than we were about it. Let's put it
right.
Now, my question, wait, Bill, this is while I got it on the top of my head. Mr. and Mrs. Bush had no idea what was behind that curtain, right?
That's correct. Yes.
They had no idea.
Right.
And did Dick Davidson, didn't he have a model HO engine that he presented him and then surprised him?
Yes, he did. He presented him the model, and then he said, and if you want to see what the real thing looks like, then they pulled the curtain.
Yeah.
And they got up in the cab. One of the things we had to do was run a compressed air line to it so they could blow the whistle.
Right.
And we had to run that from outside the building because we didn't want that locomotive sitting there running, pumping air.
Right.
And so they were up in the cab, and they both, George and Barbara both took their turns at, sitting in the engineer's seat and having their picture taken and blowing the horn and all that. We turned the air way down on the horn because, it blast everybody out of that building.
Sure. Did you get a chance to meet the president and first lady?
Yes, I did. It only for a couple of seconds. And
what an honor. I
got to meet him. I didn't I wasn't high enough up in the hierarchy to have a picture taken with him, but I did get to meet him, and then I got to meet the rest of the family when we remember when we took the whole world over there for the parachute jump.
Oh yeah.
What did we have, about a 30 or 32 car train?
Yeah, something like it was crazy.
Yeah. And we had all of the heads of state and everything else on there. And we had the Bush family and the grandkids, the kids and the grandkids and the great grandkids and all of that on the rear end of the train.
Yeah.
And we had to stop at the crossing just south of town there.
Right.
And they brought all the kids and grandkids up to the engine. And then we rolled the train in, and I had one of his great granddaughters sitting in the engineer's seat when we ran in there. And I was behind her, running the engine, but she was sitting there, looked like she was running the whole show.
Oh, how cute. That's great.
Yeah, that was neat.
Now, the engine is painted in Air Force One colors.
Yes.
And again, this is a rumor that I want to get to ask you about, that you had come up with that idea, or you had come up in some way with the design of the paint scheme on the engine. Were you involved in that?
I didn't have anything to do with it. I knew it was going to happen.
Right.
But as far as adapting the Air Force One paint scheme to the locomotive, that was some graphic designers that did that.
And they took the prime mover out of that engine before they mounted it, I understand. So
they took everything out of it that they could reuse in something else.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, I think they're building not a building, but a shed, something to keep the weather off of it.
Yeah, which is a good idea. But in the meantime, when people can get to it, you can either have it guarded all the time, which I think they're probably doing anyway. But you want to protect it from the weather, and you also want to protect it from somebody walking by with a spray can.
Hey, we got about 5 minutes left, guys, and we'll wrap it up with Steve and let him get out of here. Steve, any more interesting stories you'd like to share, either with Steam Crew or with Wasatch, upcoming projects you're working on? Anything like that you'd like to share the next couple of minutes?
As far as the Steam Crew is concerned, I will say this. I've said it a number of times. I had the best crew in the business, also the smallest crew in the business.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't take $1 million for any one of them. They did a great job. It was a shame the way they were treated after I retired, but that couldn't be helped. That was a matter of ego and a determination to get rid of anything and anybody that had anything to do with the STEAM program prior to 2011.
Right.
And so most of those guys retired. One of them is still working. He's not working in the STEAM department. He's working on the service track. But everybody else is retired, and of course, a couple of them have passed away.
Right.
But they were absolutely wonderful people.
Do they all still keep in touch with you?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. We have what we call the safety meeting at the North Yard, which is a beer joint up here at the north side of town.
Yeah.
And we drink beer and talk safety.
I bet you do.
Or maybe it's the other way around.
Yeah.
But at any rate, and my time here at Wasatch has been interesting. There's been a lot of projects that we've worked on and gotten done, and there are a lot of projects that we're still working on.
Yeah.
And we'll just see how that turns out.
You told me that you liked working there because if there's a project that comes up and you don't want to do it, you don't have to. You can pick and choose what you want to do.
This is just like it was at the railroad, where I can say, no, I'm not going to do that. It didn't happen very often, but there are things here that I'd like to be involved with, but I'm not. And there's other things that I'm tickled to death that I'm not,
Right.
Do you get a lot of inquiries on people around the country? Oh, we got a steam engine in the park and we want to get it running.
Yeah, we get those, or we get not just we want to get it running, but we want to get the asbestos off of it. And we want to make it look pretty and things of that nature. We've done a number of those. We did the one there in Houston that SP
982.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
We did that one.
Yeah.
All right.
Before they decided they didn't want it anymore.
Right.
I'm not even sure they finally moved that to the east side of Houston somewhere. I think it's on an industrial spur or something on the east side of Houston right now.
Yeah.
So, and the tender's gone, lost its tender.
The tender is in Utah. It's on the Heber
Creeper.
The Heber Creeper, yes.
Yep, I've ridden that.
It's creeping along there.
Yes, it is. Well, guys, let's wrap it up. Steve, thank you so much for joining us on last week's show and continuing this week. Fascinating stories. I think we could talk for hours, but we'll wrap it up there. Thanks so much for taking your time to join us today. I know our listeners appreciate it. And that's it. Thank you so much, sir.
Glad to do it, fellas. Thank you again.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. This is the train station on tncradio.live. I'm Bill Waldrop along with Jim Leaders. We'll be back with our next segment and another guest in just a couple of minutes. Keep it right here.
For the latest in Houston traffic, weather, news, and information, don't miss The Evening Surge on tncradio.live.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the train station on tncradio.live. I'm Bill Waldrop, your host. And joining me now is a good friend of mine. He's up in Des Moines, Iowa. His name is Steve Watrous. And I got to know Steve on the Union Pacific Steam Crew trips that I did for over 20 years. And we'll talk about how he got involved in that. Steve, welcome to the show, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, what you did for a living and all that, and how you got started with loving trains so much. Was this a lifelong thing? And what all, got you started in this?
Well, I was doomed at birth. I was born here in Des Moines, Iowa. My father was a train fanatic. And then my mother's side of the family, who lived in Sutherland, Nebraska, half of that family worked for the Union Pacific Railroad out of North Platte.
I was just saying, so it was automatic in the family. You just had to love trains.
Yes, I was doomed. But as a young man, growing up with my dad, both in model railroading and a fascination of railroads and constant train or trips out to see family members, I got to see a lot of the last steam. Right up till 59 there across Nebraska and just a little bit west of North Platte. But my fascination for steam began right there when you're a small child, and I call them diseasels, go by. They grumble a lot, and I like trains, don't get me wrong, but when a steam engine goes by, it's alive. The ground shakes, and when you're a young man, back like I was then, I was infatuated from day one.
Yeah, there's something magical about them. If you've never seen a real live operating steam locomotive or heard that real whistle, a real steam whistle on them, it'll change your life and you'll love them forever. They are certainly magical machines.
Yes. And then moving on through the years, how I even got to meet you and the steam crew was that fascination of trains had led me as part of my hobby to filming them.
Yeah.
And as video equipment improved, next thing I knew, I found I had acquired broadcast equipment. And I still don't know for sure, but what my suspicions are is that one day in the late 80s, Mr. Steve Lee and his crew had decided to start trying to put some stuff together, everything from videos, T-shirts, coffee cups, and sell them through the STEAM program. They must have noticed this kind of short guy alongside the tracks from time to time with a big camera, so let's go see if he wants to help us.
Wow.
And I said yes. So that's when I started filming in 1989. And, of course, I met you somewhere around there real early on because, lo and behold, you were going along on the trips and helping with odds and ends.
Well, that started back in 1992 when they came to Texas for our NRHS chapter here in Houston. And we did trips. I don't know if you did the whole Texas thing. I think you just did the northern part. We met up with them in Fort Worth, brought the train down, and ran public excursions to Houston to San Antonio, and then San Antonio back to Fort Worth. So I think it was somewhere along that line where that we met. And then later on down the way, you were doing this. When I introduced myself, I told you that I was in radio and television broadcasting, and I'd love to be involved in your videos. And turns out you took me up on it. And on a number of the videos that they sold on the souvenir car on the STEAM program, you did the video and I did the audio narration on them. And I'll always appreciate the opportunity to do that because it's a heck of a program and helped me get more ingrained with the program and work with them for over 20 years. So I'll always appreciate that.
Well, we were in desperate need of somebody that could narrate at the time also. Mr. Bob Krieger, a member of that crew, was trying to do it at first, and then I was filling in at times the best I could, but we needed that radio voice. And Mr. Steve Lee is the one that came to me and said, we've this guy we call Chopper Bill. He flies in the helicopter doing traffic reports in Houston. And next thing I knew, you were introducing yourself to me, so it was a done deal.
And the rest, as they say, is history. So yeah, I traveled a lot with the train. You chased that thing all over the United States numerous times and shot. You were absolutely a natural in doing videography, and it was just amazing products that you turned out. Very entertaining, well edited, just great stuff.
Well, and how I was able to do so much of that, my real job was automatic doors, like in the grocery stores, hospitals, etc.
Right.
But my boss, who had been a B-24 bomber pilot during World War II and had actually got shot down in December of 44, he loved ships, airplanes, and trains.
Yeah.
And when he found out that I was taking vacation time to go out on these trips and do the film work, he immediately told me that I didn't have to turn that in as vacation time. And he even paid a lot of my expenses as long as he would get a copy of the footage every time I came back from one.
I didn't know that aspect of it. What a guy. That's awesome.
So if you notice in some of the videos, every once in a while, there's a red truck that says Taylor Industries on it.
Yeah.
That was the company truck.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, recently, you have been actually, gosh, I guess not recently. You've been doing it for a long time. You've been organizing trips on the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad that runs between Chama, New Mexico, and Antonito, Colorado. How long have you been getting those organized trips together?
In 1988, I attended I think it was the 50th anniversary for Rocky Mountain Railroad Club, and they did a series of excursions throughout Wyoming and Colorado.
Yeah.
And I happened to be down there at Chama while they were filming Where the Hell's That Gold? It was a Willie Nelson Western.
Yeah.
I stuck around, and I fell in love with them little steam engines. Well, in 1989, I and a couple other friends, Jim Milroy and Bill Brandenburg, we returned to Chama, and we rented a caboose. And that was the beginning. I have not missed a year since 1989. We did have a year in there in the early 90s. I wish I could remember exactly when, where the funds coming from the states of Colorado and New Mexico, because the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad is a living museum. It's a 501c3 owned jointly 50-50 by the states of Colorado and New Mexico.
Okay.
And when the funds weren't coming in as fast as they were needed, they were down to one engine for 1 year.
Okay.
But we still rode. And what happened is the caboose would hold 12 people. We outgrew 12 people. Then we were renting seats in a car riding right in front of the caboose. And then lo and behold, the railroad blessed me when they built some what they call parlor cars. They're the car on the rear end of the train.
Right.
So we started renting a parlor car every year, and it would seat 20. Now, at this time, we're renting both the parlor car and the tourist car at the end of the train, because we average anywhere from 35 to 40 folks every year, like yourself. But out of a group of about 100 friends that I know over the country that like trains, we have that usual about 35 to 40 people show up. So we haven't missed a year since 1989.
Now, and you always do it on or around October 1st of each year. Explain why that date or that general area of time.
There's these trees out there called aspen trees.
Yeah.
And they are densely, per acre, it's one of the most densest part of the Rocky Mountains as far as the number of aspen trees. And you mix those with the big Douglas firs and the ponderosa pines and the numerous other types of fir and pine trees, and you come to that period in the fall, and those trees are turning their bright yellows, some of them a burnt orange. The scrub oaks turn a bright red. You add the mountains to it, it's just a beautiful place to be right around that beginning of October.
I would agree. I've gotten lots of great video and lots of great pictures riding on that train, and come up early sometimes in the early years, and I'd go out and chase, with you and some other people, and chase this thing up through the mountains. We're climbing up mountainsides, and cliffs and all this other stuff to get the right pictures of this thing, because it's in the mountains, and it's always pretty cold up there. But I had a kind of a neat adventure on this last trip we just did, month and a half ago, something like that, if that. So, but I tell you what, let's take a quick break, Steve, and just relax for just a moment here. This is the Train Station on TNCRadio.live. I'm Bill Waldrop. Our guest today is Steve Watrous out of Des Moines, Iowa, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
You're listening to TNCRadio.live. Remember to tune into the Truckers Network radio show with Shelley Johnson, weekdays at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to the Train Station. This is TNCRadio.live. I'm Bill Waldrop, and my guest is Steve Watrous, a friend of mine. He is in Des Moines, Iowa, and travels all over the country chasing trains and doing projects. Steve, back to the train there. We just call it the Chama train. It's actually called the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic that runs between Chama, New Mexico, and Antonito, Colorado. It's a fantastic ride. I was just up there with y'all about a month and a half ago, and for the first time, I drove from Houston all the way up there to join you guys. And that was interesting for me because, I know it gets cold up there around that time of year. Well, on the morning of the trip, on Friday, October 1st, we had to drive from Chama to Antonito to get the train. We're going up there, and my God, it had snowed overnight, and I was driving through slush, kind of icy slush on top of the mountain pass there. I had just left Houston a little earlier, and it was almost 90 degrees, and now I'm driving through snow and ice. That's kind of shocking for a Texas boy. You guys up in Des Moines probably used to it, but for me, it was like a bit of a pucker factor driving over that pass. But I made it, and I had some guests in the car with me. I just took my time, but you never know what the weather's going to be like up there in that part of the country.
You might have checked a few days after you left. We had a day the train couldn't run because we had 13 inches of snow up at Cumbres Summit.
Wow.
And the train could run, but that parking lot that you're familiar with up there at Cumbres,
yes,
That had the 13 inches of snow in it, but they closed that highway pass.
Wow.
And without highway, we can't run the buses to take the people if they want to begin their journey, over in Antonito. They couldn't have got over there and vice versa, because the railroad operates several different choices. You can begin your trip with a bus to your original departure point, and then you're back to where you left your car at the end of your trip, or you can do vice versa.
Right.
And
always a great lunch at Osier also, which is included.
Yes. An unbelievable lunch. We tell everybody when they want to buy snacks, don't forget, lunch is just like Thanksgiving if you get the turkey dinner.
Right.
It's the stuffing, it's all you can eat, the cranberries, the desserts, and that's been a famous, notoriously famous addition to this trip for people that travel from all over the United States. As you know, I'm a docent on the railroad. Now, a docent, we are the people that ride along in the train to answer your questions, to help you get in the right food line
right.
and make sure that you're getting on the right car and where your tickets are, where your seats are. But I want to add, when I first made my first trip, going back to 1989, I ran into a group of folks, because, how does this all happen? It's called the Friends of the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad.
All right.
There was a lawyer by the name of Bill Locke, who lives in Albuquerque, that had decided to get all of the different volunteer groups that over the years had been helping to keep this railroad going. He got them all together, and he formed a 501c3 called the Friends of the Cumbres and Toltec. By doing that, volunteers could, legitimately claim their travel and their expenses to help the railroad.
Right.
But we do everything from rebuild the line side buildings and keep them upright. They were all built in 1880. We also rebuild all the freight car equipment so they can do photo, freight charters. And folks come from all over the world just to film them. It's a recreation of what you would have seen in the 40s or 50s with a steam-powered freight train. But then we also supply what I was just alluding to. We call ourselves the docents, and to help out in any way we can, everything from yard tours to helping you on the train itself.
Awesome. Now, if anybody that's listening has never ridden this train or any kind of a steam train, it's right in the center of the country. Cheyenne, New Mexico is just south of the Colorado border. So it's easy to get to from anywhere, but it does have a limited operating season. Can you tell us, if people want to go out and take their families and ride this thing, how can they make reservations? How much does it cost? And what are the operating dates for this railroad each year?
Yes, I would always recommend going to the website, and it's called the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad. And it'll tell you the different kind of rides that are available, everything from first class, down to just normal coach seating. But it is for the same reasons you alluded to with weather conditions. Memorial Weekend is when they open. And then about the second or third weekend in October, this year we went to the third weekend, they have to shut down because of the snow situation.
Right.
They get a lot of snow around Chama. You mentioned it's dead center. The train trip itself from Chama to Antonito goes back and forth across the Colorado and New Mexico border 11 times.
Wow.
The whole railroad is situated in the national forest. It's the Carson National Forest when you're in New Mexico. It's the Rio Grande National Forest when you're in Colorado.
So it runs only from Memorial Day through, mid-October or so?
That is correct. And I can give you examples. I told you about the one day we couldn't run this year. 3 years ago, I think it was, the last 2 weeks, because I always do our annual trip, and then I stick around and work as a docent till the closing.
Right.
We had 6 days out of those last 2 weeks we could not operate the train because the buses couldn't get over Highway 17.
Wow. That's a lot of snow.
So, and I want to correct, it wasn't that we couldn't run. It was a different kind of schedule. Instead of being able to take a trip where you went all the way through from Antonito to Chama or vice versa, you had to go to Osher to the dining hall and ride your same train back, so you got back to the same parking lot your vehicle was in.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful trip. If you've never seen a steam engine before, or you've never ridden a narrow gauge train, of course, narrow gauge is what, 3-foot gauge, is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, so it's a narrow gauge train. What were real quick, briefly, what was the history of this railroad? Was it a mining railroad, or when did it first start, and what did they do when they first started?
Well, in 1870, William Jackson Palmer formed the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad. Okay. He headed south out of Denver, and his intent was to get to El Paso and meet the Mexicans building a railroad up from Mexico City. Right. Well, many people that are rail fans have to be familiar with what happened at Raton Pass with the Santa Fe Railroad and also the Royal Gorge. Right. They had a little war over who was going to use those passes, and it ended up getting tied up in the court system. Well, at that same time, it was around 1875, 76, they were discovering gold and silver in Silverton, Colorado. So he decided to make a turn west. They left Antonito in March of 1880. They reached Chama by Christmas. They reached Durango by 1881, and they reached Silverton by 1882. The railroad was built to get to Silverton, Colorado. Now, he picked that southern route over 3 easier routes because he knew he needed to haul more than just ore. And if he took the route he did, the ranchers had livestock that would need to be hauled. There was coal mining starting to begin. They were finding oil in Farmington. There was a lot more happening down there that could be hauled by trains than just ore out of Silverton. But the railroad was built to get to Silverton, Colorado.
But it doesn't go there now. It only runs between Antonito and Chama. It doesn't connect to any other railroads. Is that correct?
Right. The trackage was torn up from Chama to Durango there in 1970. I mean, shortly after they closed things down. They had finally given the Rio Grande permission to abandon the narrow gauge from Antonito to Durango when Highway 17 was completed in 1970. They knew nobody would have a reason to haul anything on that narrow gauge freight train when it could be put on a truck and delivered a lot faster.
Right. Well, it's a fascinating history. It's a beautiful ride. I know you and I both highly recommend, if you've never seen a train, a steam engine, narrow gauge, through the mountains, whatever, here's your opportunity. Go online. It's the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad. They've got a website. They'll tell you the operating dates and the different classes of service. It's a great run. You can fly into Denver if you don't want to drive all the way. You can fly into Denver or Albuquerque and work your way there after a couple of hours. It's a beautiful drive all through the Rocky Mountain area over there, but we highly recommend it. Hey, Steve, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. It's been fascinating. Look forward to seeing you next year in Chama on the train. And again, thanks for joining us, and it's been a real pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Absolutely. This is the Train Station on TNCRadio.live. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on next week's show right here on TNCRadio.live. Have a great day.